Hi guys, my name is Jay from fantasyartworkshop.com. Today I'm going to show you how to draw the front view of the human skull. What I normally do is I start out by marking where the top and the bottom of the skull are going to fall on the page. And you'll notice in this video that I use a lot of construction lines. And once you get proficient at drawing the skull, you really don't need to draw lines like this, but when you're starting out, it's kind of a good idea to get a better idea of what the proportions are and where everything is gonna fall. You also see me doing this a lot. I generally use my pencil as a measuring stick to get the equidistant dimensions. It's a really handy technique. So to start out, what I did is I drew this vertical line down, and then I divided it in the center. Okay? And what you want to do after that is try to establish the width of the skull. Now what you could do to establish the width of the skull is take that center point, alright? And then from that center point, you want to actually divide down from this point, okay? Divide down again, divide up, and then divide down. And that dimension, that distance from the center point, is going to give you the exact width of the half of the skull. And so you want to take that dimension and translate it to the left and the right side of the skull, or this vertical line right now. And then you can actually validate it by drawing a right triangle here. And if it looks like a right triangle, you've got a right triangle there, then you've got a good dimension for your width. And what I generally do is I generally make a rectangle and translate that equidistant dimension up to the top and the bottom of that rectangle. And it kind of helps me establish where all my anatomical features are going to fall. It's really up to you how many of these construction lines you want to include in your drawing. You could always clean it up after you're done. I kind of like the look of drawings sometimes when they include these rough construction lines. Okay, so then after I establish the rectangle, I'll divide the top of that rectangle in half, actually into quarters. So I divide it in half, and then I divide it in half again. And then this lower half here, this line right here, this is actually going to be the brow line. That's going to be the brow line or the brow ridge. Okay? And then if you divide this section here in half again, this little tick mark right here, this is where the actual top of the nasal bone is going to fall. Okay, that's that small bone that's on top of your nose, and you can actually feel it. Now, to get the dimension of the actual opening where your nose will be, what you do is you divide that lower section in half, you divide that half again, and then you divide that half one more time. And that line right there is going to be that's going to be where the bottom of your nose falls. Alright. And then you could draw a little teardrop shape or a rounded triangle. Kind of a narrow rounded triangle, and then you could fill that in if you want. Okay, so the next item we're going to focus on the next items we're going to focus on are where the teeth, the upper and lower teeth are going to fall on the page. Okay, and the upper teeth are going to the top of the upper teeth are going to fall right below the halfway point of the lower section. Okay? And then if you divide that lower section into quarters again, you divide this space into half, you divide this space in half here, That lower division will be the bottom of the lower teeth, okay? And then if you divide this section, or if you come down a little bit from the midpoint, that's going to give you where the top teeth fall, you know, the division between the top and the lower teeth. And always remember that the top teeth are usually a little bit bigger than the bottom teeth. Now, I want you guys to realize something, and you'll probably see this a little bit, you'll probably understand it a little bit better in the other videos that I'm going to be putting out. But actually, when you're looking at a human face from the front, you're actually looking at the skull sort of tilted down a little bit. So your teeth are going to be actually rounded. You're going to see a bit of a curvature here when you're looking at the teeth from the front. And if you want to know where they curve up to that halfway point, point of the vertical division that we made. I'll just rough in some teeth here. I'm not going to get too fancy with the teeth. Alright. So the next thing, I guess, well, actually before I get into the top of the head here, I'm going to go into another talk about another little issue here. What I want to show you here is that the skull, actually, if you go into that halfway point of the skull, just above that halfway point, the skull turns in a little bit. So put a little bit of a tick mark right here, and that's going to be indicating where the top of the skull runs into the jaw. Okay, and then that jaw runs down at it continues down at a specific angle, and so let's try to figure out where that angle is going to be landing. So to get that angle, basically what you do is you divide the space at the bottom in half, okay? Then you take that half and divide that again, okay? Now you'll divide that half again, and then that half again. So you're basically dividing it to the half of that part right there, then you're dividing it to the right, and then you're dividing it to the left. And then you're going to draw a line down from that tick point there that you made at the halfway point of the skull, and you're going to draw that right down, and that's going to give you the angle that the jaw falls on. Okay. You just draw a line down. Okay, then at the bottom of the jaw, as the jaw comes down, it actually turns into the chin. And in order to know where that jaw is going to be turning into the chin, in towards the chin, all you need to do is go down a little bit from the lower teeth, the bottom of the lower teeth, and translate that line over horizontally. And then that angle is basically that halfway point between the other division that you made. Okay, so just from that halfway point of one side of the skull, divide that over again to the left, and then you'll have that angle at which the jaw turns in towards the chin. And you could kind of round that out a little bit if you want. Okay. Okay, now to get the top curve of the skull, you have to really pay attention to this top curve, because if you don't make this curve correctly, the skull really begins to look a bit odd and unnatural. And what I do is just generally divide this area up into quadrants, and then you could just, if you want, and so yeah, it's just halfway here and then halfway here, and then you see what I'm doing, and then just draw an imaginary X in the middle there. Okay, and at that point, at that center of the X is right where the curvature of the skull is gonna land. Okay. So Yeah, if this curvature goes beyond this point, the skull's just not going to look right. So just try to keep that in mind. Okay. And that's gonna continue around to that little tick mark we made over there on the side of the skull, where the skull started turning in, connecting with the jaw. Do the same thing to the other side. Okay. Okay, so the next item I'm going to focus on is the eye socket. Okay, so to make the eye sockets, basically from that brow area to the top of the nasal bone, you want to take that little space there. See, there's the bone. You want to divide that space in half. Okay, and then what you do is extend it out, extend the line out, and make a square. Make a little square in this area. All right, and then do the same thing to the other side. Okay, there. And the most important thing about the square